Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Women in Robotics Project Advance speaker series, where we're going to be interviewing women and non binary people about their journey in the field of robotics. Feel free to type your questions in the Zoom, YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook chat, or wherever else it is that you're watching from at any time during the event. We will be circling back to these questions during the Q&A in the sort of last half of the session. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cynthia Yeung. I am the head of product at Plus One Robotics, a founding board member for Women in Robotics, and also the former COO of Cafe X. Before we start, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow Women in Robotics Mentorship Committee members, Laura Stelsner, Carrie Fetzer-Borelli, Hallie Siegel, and Andra Kay. Today, we are excited to welcome roboticist Ariel Anders as a second interviewee in our series. Ari is a Black feminist roboticist who enjoys spending time with her family and artistic self-expression. She is the first roboticist hired at Robust.AI, an early-stage robotics startup building the world's first industrial-grade cognitive engine. Ari received her bachelor's in computer engineering from UC Santa Cruz and her PhD in computer science from MIT, where she taught project-based collaborative robotics courses, developed an iOS app for people with vision impairment, and received a grant to install therapy lamps across campus. Her research focused on reliable robotic manipulation with the vision of enabling household helpers. I think that's something that all of us actually probably aspire to in some way, shape, or form. She joined Robust upon graduation and was recently promoted to senior roboticist just earlier this year. In addition to being featured on RoboHub's 2020 list of 30 women in robotics you need to know about, she also serves on the board of Women in Robotics. In this interview series, we're going to be exploring the inflection points of women's career journeys and try to identify patterns that may help others in the field. So without further ado, welcome Ari. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here and talk about my experience. I feel like I'm still very early on my career, so hopefully, people who are also early in their career can maybe will have shared insight on this journey into a field that is really exciting and just booming in the past couple of years.
Yep. Yeah, so I guess like on that note, did you always know you wanted to be a roboticist?
I knew I wanted to be a doctor, uh, but that was a medical doctor. So it took actually going into a hospital and realizing
Mm,
this was something that made me so uncomfortable that
mm,
I did not think I could actually put myself through, any of the work you'd have to do. So this actually meant that I was really confused about where I wanted to go, although um, I had thought I was going to be a doctor, so I was taking some of the advanced classes like calculus or um, whatever the college prep stuff you're supposed to take. And I remember I got into UC Santa Cruz, and when there was like a checkbox of like, what majors are you interested in? So I checked computer something or other because I liked using computers. I had a cool MySpace page, and somehow um, I got this really bizarre phone call from them saying, "Hey, that's so awesome! You want to do computers? We'd love to tell you more about Santa Cruz." And I was just shocked because I feel like I'd never participated in any program that said, "Hey, you're interested in technology. We want you to actually do this. We want you here." And yeah, that's how my journey started.
that's so interesting. So I guess maybe like going back a little bit then, as you were growing up, were there any particular people who kind of played a really influential role in your life?
I think growing up, I was really into horseback riding, and there's I would compete as well. So there was just a ton of work around uh, trying to get yourself into a position where you could compete. You'd have to go and practice. You'd have to take care of the animal before you take care of yourself. I remember I learned how to iron my clothes and do my hair. I learned a lot of things like grit and hard work. So, at the same time, I remember my parents were definitely interested in us, the kids, doing well in school. There was a notion of school nights, and you couldn't go out too late on a school night, and you always had to do your homework and have it completed before the next day. And so when I went to college, I remember I did the same thing. And that actually set me apart. It's because I just stuck to the things I learned. So I think it was a combination of definitely my mom's influence in trying to help me, um, just be responsible as a kid, and it extended throughout my career.
Got it. So this like interest in computers then, when you sort of tick that box for UC Santa Cruz, where did that come from then?
At the time, I was pretty much interested in either horseback riding or playing video games. And I didn't have the most friends growing up in childhood, I would say that. So I loved using my computer. It was this wall I could have like whatever life I wanted. I could actually say the things I wanted to say that I had a hard time maybe saying in person, and make the friends and connections I was struggling to make outside of animals. So it was, I always used computers well. I remember
Mm,
I figured out how to use PowerPoint without having to take all the tutorials. I used computers frequently, and I was willing to just put in random effort of clicking all the buttons until maybe something worked. So I don't think there was anything deliberate about, oh, computing's a great career. This is a good choice. There's something interesting here. In fact, my family being is much more medicine focused. So it was kind of like,
mm.
hmm, where are you going? And it ended up being a really fun career pathway, but it wasn't something like Ari's following her parents' footsteps into medicine.
That's so interesting. And so obviously, UC Santa Cruz, giving you that call of the blue, being like, "Hey, like we saw that you were interested in this," that probably played a factor. But were there any other reasons why you ended up choosing, UC Santa Cruz out of all of the places that you could have studied computer engineering in?
So at the time, I didn't have the strongest academic record to get into all the schools I was necessarily interested in. And in fact, I was kind of wondering, can I just pursue a culinary career? Because I like eating and
Mm,
cooking. So I was a really confused 17-year-old. And by this point, we had moved from Bakersfield, my horse up to Paso Robles. And I remember out of the schools I got into, uh, of which there weren't many, UC Santa Cruz was the closest. They invited me to go up there. They were super nice, and I went up to the campus, and I loved the trees. Like I just was like, this feels right. So there wasn't a ton of. I think perhaps you'll find a theme is like there wasn't a ton of deliberate career thought in my
mm.
approach to where I am today.
And then I guess, what was that experience like at UC Santa Cruz? Like, how did you go from like, well, like this is something I'm interested in to being like, I am going to commit to a PhD. Like how did that journey kind of happen?
So I think there's two aspects of it. Um, when I finished high school, I remember feeling like sitting in this huge high school is a really large number, and people were walking across the stage, and I'm bored. I'm just
Mm,
like, oh my God, it's taking forever. And people were giving commencement speeches and talking about how they had the best 4 years of their life, how wonderful it was. And I just had this moment where I was like, I'm going off to college, and I haven't really been caring too much about these things because I just like horses and playing video games. I really don't want to like sit in this, stadium or whatever, and think, wow, how did that person go out and have like the best time of their life this past
mm,
4 years? Like I think I actually want to make some friends when I'm there, and maybe I want to do better at school, and maybe I want to do some volunteer work. So I kind of had this like, I think I want to be something different when I do college. I don't want to, have 4 years come by and think, yeah, I could have done a lot more there. I didn't want that regret again.
mm,
So I think there was this impulse, motivated self impulse, but that doesn't matter if it's not steered. So I did come in through a summer bridge program before school started. They invited a group of students to show up, and they told us, look at these careers that happen after college. And I'm like,
mm.
ooh, I could get a job just by going to school for 4 years. This is kind of nice. Um, And they also were like, if you want to graduate, here are the classes you need to take. Here's,
Mm.
they showed me the curriculum course chart. So, and they're like, and we'll help you enroll in your first set of classes so that way you get these to go to the next part. So it was just like I got in through being part of these programs where people at the university were like, hey, you can sign up for this, you can sign up for that. And I really missed the point that you can doesn't mean you should or you
Mm.
must. So I did have an awkward moment where I remember I kept going to office hours even though I didn't need assistance and I didn't know what they were for, but people said you need to go to office hours at this bridge program. So I remember I went to office hours and I would show the professor my homework and he said it looks good and then I'd leave and proceeded to do that for an entire quarter because I didn't realize you don't need to do that. It was kind of just, I think I took things a little too literally.
And then so as you were doing that, then like, what motivated you to be, not only do I want to do my kind of, bachelor's degree, but now I want to go ahead and do a PhD as well. Like, how did that decision process happen?
So I think, during that first year, the first 2 years, I started to have, like most people, a lot of struggles during sophomore year. Like, sophomore year is a retention crux for
Mm.
college students. And I remember not really fitting in there, which, given my not really fitting in childhood and high school, wasn't a terrible thing, but I was still like, I don't really know about this. I think maybe I should do a different thing. Like, this isn't working out. But at the same time, I had heard through these programs about summer research options, and there was a bionics lab at my school. And, this one seemed perfect. Okay, I can continue doing my engineering stuff, but I could apply my engineering stuff to medicine, and then I can still be along the pathway of, you know, deviated from the family's role of medicine and goal of making people healthier and instead do that. And I started I signed up, I got in, started that summer after my sophomore year, and um, I had a very independent project. It was just me working on something, and it it gave me, so my project, by the way, was um, preparing a tooth for a crowning operation. So we
Oh.
had an industrial robot arm and attached like a mill, like a dental, and then I remember I scanned the tooth, and then I had it in SolidWorks, which was kind of a weird choice, and I like figured out paths like along the boundary of the tooth, like cross sectional things, and um, I wrote a Perl script. Of all scripting language you could use, I learned stuff in Perl, so I wrote a script to move those points in just a little bit, so that way you like don't just mill around the tooth, but a little bit inside of it, and transferred that into position-based coordinates, and had the robot arm move along them. And there was a big challenge to make sure things were registered, like where's the tooth actually, and this was a fake tooth modeled, like it was mounted to the
Hmm.
to yeah, it wasn't a moving tooth. um but really, that project, 10 weeks, I had successfully milled some teeth, and it, it gave me the motivation of like, I can do anything.
Huh.
It really, I was able to do this project with tools I never
Yeah.
even heard, never even knew. Um, and I was able to program a robot arm to drill a path around a little tooth. And I think, when you encounter other things, it's like when you have this self confidence of, well, this is all really hard and terrible, all those things happen, but once I managed to mill a tooth within a
Hmm.
robot. So you can, it gives you kind of this, it gave me the courage to keep going into my college studies, even
Research.
when there were issues with other students. Always
Mhm.
had the lab to go back to. Ended up being an undergrad researcher for the rest of college, and I would be there when I was in other places. So it's just like I had my little thing that was really mine during college that, you know, I did it, I felt good at it, it helped me, continue where I was.
Got it. So it sounds like this sort of research lab became your sort of like almost like home away from home. And then, was it like because it felt so comfortable that you're like, hey, I just want to keep on doing this forever and therefore I'm going to go do a PhD or what series of, sort of decisions or events like, happened that made you decide like, okay, you know what, PhD is the next sort of stage of my journey.
So I think a big shout out to the Summer Bridge program. I think if people are watching this, they may go off to UC Santa Cruz just to participate in it. Um, One of the aspects of the Summer Bridge program was to take a math exam, and based off of that, they had some tutoring classes. And I managed to do really well on the exam. So they were like, hey, we have this tutoring option. Would you like to be a tutor? And I'm there thinking, yeah, I could have a job already. So I managed to start school and get my first job at the same time. And so I had started I was a tutor for a class, like I was a co-lead of a section where it was just very workshop based. People would come in and we'd do uh, math. And I ended up continuing to do some sort of section leading with college algebra, single variable calculus, pre-calculus throughout my entire 4 years. So I liked teaching and I liked research, and I was involved in the programs that were saying like, you should do your GRE so that way you can have an application. And that 10-week program did include like try to write uh, a personal statement, or like I had access to resources who could give me insight on how to get where I need to go, or where I
Wow.
could go, because there never was like I want to go to MIT.
Mhm.
In fact, I like had looked very small at like maybe I could continue working at UC Santa Cruz, or maybe, and I had like a couple of other schools I was thinking about in California. And my advisor suggested I apply to other schools. And I'm like, floored. You think I should apply to this school? That's wild. So it was really just kind of surreal to hear someone thinks you should apply to the top, university in
Mhm.
ECS. Kind of just a wild thing. So, but he advised me to shoot for it because he said if you want to teach, usually it helps you to be able to teach in places. If you have a degree from those places, then you have more options.
I think
So
MIT is particularly notorious for that, actually.
I think that's something we actually want to change.
Mhm.
Uh, but yes, that was good advice given the current trends of academic hiring.
Got it. And so was it just like shoot for the top and that's why you're gonna go to MIT, or were there other schools that you were considering? Like how did you decide that that was the right place for you?
Um, so there was Berkeley and MIT that became like one and two, and at Berkeley, it just seemed like a perfect fit. They had a surgical robot that my lab, the bionics lab, had been working on. There was like a clear team to be working with, clear things to do. And I really wanted to go there. I wouldn't be so far away from everyone. Everything was perfect. And so then I went with the option that seemed much harder. And I
Mm.
honestly can't tell you why. I think was it because I visited MIT most recently before I had to make my decision, so it was just most prominent in my mind. Uh,
Mm.
one of the things someone had said to me was like, "Clearly, you figured it out in the UC system, but can you do it over off in the East Coast?" So maybe it was the challenge. There was the other aspect that I felt there were lots of cool, like robotics research going on at MIT. So maybe if I didn't like surgical robots, maybe if that project for me at Berkeley didn't work out, I wouldn't have anything else to do. And so I guess I felt perhaps challenged by that. Can you figure things out on the East Coast? You'll if you can, you'll have a bigger network, and there could be other options if my project isn't working.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Um, Just from going through, your biography and some of the other things that you've sort of mentioned publicly, it seems like you have an interest in sort of mental wellness and sustainability. Could you tell me more about that and how that sort of influenced your work in robotics?
So that didn't show up in undergrad, and that is something I I realized when I got to grad school and attempted to just do the same thing, work terrible hours, put myself through terrible, stressful situations, go for whatever's hardest all the time, like just aggressively schedule things. I remember I had scheduled a Sunday all nighter because it gave me so many hours to work in the lab. Like it literally, I had a quarter where Sundays in my calendar, I had anticipated an all nighter. So I did not know how to struggle with my curriculum. And I was fortunate enough that the way I took the classes, I took my lower divisions courses really seriously. So that made the next courses easier and next. And so I really did not anticipate to go somewhere and be not a superstar. And I think everyone at MIT gets this. They talk about imposter syndrome, but there's like literally you show up in a class and people can do things that you cannot do. You currently do not know how to do. And it turns out a lot of those things show up. That happens all the time. So I just really started to struggle. And I think, found that the struggle was there and the winter was worse because of the complete lack of sunshine. So that's why I ended up getting my own therapy lamp, and that mission to install therapy lamps across campus came from an MIT led initiative to try to improve mental health awareness and just like make MIT a better place. And they said they just had this grant option where people all over campus could apply for some money to do something that they think would make MIT a little bit better. And so I was like, oh, when I struggled during the winter, I had to do a lot of things to get a little therapy lamp that I didn't have to pay for. I had to go get the doctor, this or that. And I really just wanted to try it. And I think it'd be really cool if we could put them on in campus for people to say, like, is this a light that will work for me? And then maybe they can get one if they like it, or maybe not. But the idea was, yeah, people need to know it is bad in the Northeast. So there was awareness. Like, uh, I thought SAD was a joke, seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah.
I thought it was a funny acronym. I had no idea it was an actual real thing. So there's the awareness, and then there's like, here's the first thing people suggest trying if you're suffering from SAD, and here's an option to just have people learn about it and have the option to use it. So I I also look at that moment as the first time I've ever publicly said, like, I have depression. And it was a big step for me.
That's so important, I think. I think a lot of people struggle with that, and there's just not enough conversation about it. So really thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like, when you first went to MIT was actually with the intention of teaching, but upon graduation you actually ended up at Robust instead. Like how did that happen?
So I think there's in the questions you sent to me, there was one like, where did you have like not a high on your journey? And for me, I think I really wanted to stay in academia. I really wanted to be a teacher. I really enjoyed those courses. And I just wasn't producing the research that would give me the career options I was interested in. I think one aspect of it is your desire to be a teacher does transform into you want to be a professor at an R1 school, and ideally one of these R1 schools. So it's like you just set the bar ridiculously high. And in order for me to go off and do that, I would really need to do a postdoc because I had not created this sort of scholastic achievement in terms of trying to lead my own lab. And I also think I was not in the state ready to lead, too many independent research projects like that. So there was a moment where I had to say, I don't think I want to do a postdoc. I don't think I want to keep investing in this. I don't think I want to, like, I see people be successful here, and usually it's hard work. It is, strong background, and there is a little bit of luck going on. And I don't want to put myself through another moment, 4 years or however many years of being a postdoc to try to see if I'll get that thing working. So I chose to go away, and it felt terrible. It felt like a huge low for me, honestly. So it's one of those things where you see people doing whatever they're doing, but
Yeah.
for me it was like I really want to go here, and I didn't go there. Even when I said like going here is going to still be all these things, and I don't think this is going to make me happy. So I went to industry instead. But then it's like, well, I never planned on this. What even? Where do you go? Like, what should you do? How do you get a job?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
this is
I think
cool.
we're testing out new software, so we're we're very excited about this sort of new functionality. Thank you for your comment. Yeah, no, that explains the decision to go into industry. But why robust, and how did you get in? I mean, you get to work with people like Rod Brooks and like Henrik Christensen, like these sort of big names in robotics. Like, how did that happen?
So I feel like you answered the why. Uh,
Sorry, that's probably just my own bias.
no, I think part of the why there was I did just spend most of my adult life as a student. So
Mm,
I went to a place where I thought I could learn. When if you've ever talked with Anthony Jules or Rod Brooks or all the people there, like they're so knowledgeable, they are so kind and helpful, approachable. So I was like, I want to learn. I don't know how to do industry. I hadn't been thinking about it for a really long time. Like I hadn't. It wasn't a career option I was considering for so long. So I need to go somewhere where I feel like I can learn to actually figure out what I'm doing. So for me, I think the decision to choose Robust was because I felt like there were people there I could learn from. Um, Now the how is also a great question, and I think that goes to your network. And for me, uh, I was in my graduation gown, and Daniela Roos told me, "Oh, you're going to industry. I thought you were going to go there, but oh well, if you are, have you made a decision?" I said, "Not yet." She said, "Oh, you should hear about this one place." I'm like, "It's brand new." I'm like, "Okay." Probably not because I have other ideas of like I don't think I want to interview ever again. I've done
yeah.
that too much. Um, but then I did I did follow up on it, and um, it was one of those things where I I went with it, even though at the time being the first roboticist means we didn't have like a firm, and it's also stealthy. So it's like I had no idea really what we were gonna do, what we're doing.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those things where uh, I bought into the people who were running the company and wanted to work with them, even though they couldn't tell me exactly what they're building because that was secretive and also brand new. So it was kind of one of those, well, I'm going to go jump again.
So it sounds like having a strong network was very very important and impactful in that journey. What what sort of advice do you have for like going about building that network? Is it just sort of a matter of which school you go to, or are there kind of other things that you try to do proactively, I guess?
So I did mention I had interviewed a long time. And I think I'm a very independent person. So initially, I tried signing up for things that I thought were interesting and contacted, like I didn't contact people, I just put in applications and I heard nothing. Like I really, and I was just like, I thought it wasn't like that bad what I had, but so it was like nothing was coming in. So I message someone. I messaged some people I knew. I'm like, hey, and now on the flip side, it's kind of crazy because as someone working at a company that's growing, we love it when people say, hey, are there any options for someone like me? Like, yeah, please contact the people you know. Like they're usually really excited to hear from you. They actually know you have this background, they like you're not just they're really excited. So Yes. Thank you, Andrea, for posting that. Yes, Robust is hiring. So it's one of those things where I felt so self-conscious contacting people, but I did because there was nothing and I did want to have a job. And then it just kind of like started to come through, and I had interviews I was doing, and interviewing as a PhD student or PhD graduate, it's a little hard because you're supposed to summarize your research
Mhm.
and sometimes give a presentation. And, it was kind of like this mental shift. I didn't know that. And I thought I was done. Like, I thought I was done presenting this work. Like, I graduated, but then, like, you go off and use it. But that being said, even if you're like, I thought I had completed this work, it is work that you're really well versed in. So you can answer questions, you can talk about it. So it ended up being like, oh, this is something really easy for me to talk about because I've talked about it for far too long.
That's helpful. So a lot of members in our community, often ask like, what does it take to get promoted to the next step? Like, maybe they joined a company right out of college, similar to yourself, and they're like, I want to be promoted to that next step, that next level. I want to be a senior engineer. What advice do you have for them?
So it doesn't just happen. I remember I had been at Robust for a year or so. I don't know. The timing's weird, and I'm at a startup and there's all this stuff going on. So there's kind of like, hey, I noticed I've doing more things and I've been doing things for a while. I think I've been doing them well. I think maybe there could be things attached to, that, to recognize what I've done so far.
So you
And it,
proactively started that conversation.
I did. And
Wow.
that was hard for me because I don't think self advocacy is something I'm really comfortable with. But it's something where you got to do. At the same time, you can't just run around and say, I'm
Give
ready.
me this or give me that. Yeah.
So, like, how do you even have that conversation? And I asked people, I called people and asked them. Like, I really did. I talked with them. And then I found out, like, oh, okay. And again, with this startup, we're building these things, these formal structures. So it's like there isn't already, say, a performance review cadence that's Google had. Like, you're starting. And so I learned, like, okay, what things would go into there? What things do you want to do? What things have you been good at? And then I remember I had given it to like this, I had a document of what I had felt like I had done. And I had shared it with someone at my company who's familiar with it. And she gave me advice. And yeah, so I did not just like, it didn't happen. I asked people, how does this happen? What do you do? And followed through on that advice.
Got it. Are there particular skills that you think sort of prepared you well, for that next stage in your career, or are there maybe things that you wish you started investing in earlier?
I think there's an opportunity to answer a little bit what you're saying and what Preeti just asked. So I was really interested in teaching and sharing knowledge. I also was really excited about programming the robot to do things. And sometimes there was so much overhead in getting stuff to work on the robots or doing project based lab courses that I wasn't, pushing the envelope far enough in a novel
Mm.
direction for it to be a publication. I had very few publications related to my independent research. I had, I think, most of my publications are second or third author or part of less of my main track stuff. So I did feel what Preeti seemed feeling like, I don't think I've led or successfully produced enough successful independent research things. Um, that being said, the teaching part is you learned a ton of skills there. Like you learned how to document your code or write out your ideas or present them, or like so much of the skill set I had, doing a lot of teaching is so applicable with working because a lot about teaching is communication, is spending time with people and sharing knowledge. So that's useful at work. I think there's also my interest in like programming robots, getting them to work, having, my PhD uh, had a robot like demo. It had this thing, it had tests. I actually ran the robot for it. And that was a point of pride for me. And it turned out that, okay, being able to actually get robots up and running software is an asset, especially, like people come in with very different backgrounds. But if you can competently go in and like, oh, okay, I can get that one running something. Uh, that something may not be this new algorithm of motion planning that gets you, whatever cool accolades, but it does show up, and it is something valuable at a robotics company.
So I guess maybe like in retrospect, now that you're slightly older and wiser, if you had to go back in time and like be like, like Ari of like, say 6 years ago, what would you tell her to do differently, if anything?
Mm, I'm like, where was I 6 years ago? So I think
It doesn't have to be exactly 6 years
I
ago,
was
but
looking at 6 years ago.
say like 4 to 6 years ago, like some period of time. I think a lot of the people who are listening in are kind of in that stage where they're like, just a couple years behind you, and so what advice would you have if you had a chance to do things again?
So I think if I could, I would be less critical, self-critical on where I was in my journey, or what decisions I had made, say, to step away from pursuing a faculty position. I think for me, not doing that felt so demoralizing. Like I gave up on this dream I had for so long, and instead to realize that, like, as a human who is growing and changing, what you want in life changes, what you value changes, what your goals are change. So it's not like you're giving up on a goal, but your goal is like, I don't want to try to work so hard to get a resume to get that position. And a lot of my friends who are there, it does seem kind of rough for them too. So I, I think for me it was to be more flexible on my goals.
That's good. So a quick reminder to the audience, again, this is your chance and opportunity to ask questions, to Ari. And so I can ask her questions all day, but if there's anything in particular that you would like to ask her, please again, put them in the notes and the chat, and we can make sure that they get answered. So more questions for you, Ari. You describe yourself as a Black feminist roboticist. What does that mean?
I think one of the ways I noticed I described myself meeting people was like, hi, I'm Ari. I'm a roboticist at, MIT, or I'm a PhD student, and I also recognize that having your identity be your job is not great, because jobs can be good or bad. There can be fluctuation, some natural, some who knows. But so if you tie yourself to what you do, it's a recipe for like not the type of growth or the life that you want. So I'd spend a lot of time thinking about, who am I? What do I care about? I am biracial. I come from a very different family. We're academically focused. I have a lot of time I spend doing artistic things. I have, all these different aspects of who I am. And it's not just a roboticist. And so while I do like that I found a career that gives me passion and I'm ambitious for it, I like it, and it, like when I'm doing well at it, it gives me energy to do more of it. Like I like that I found something like that for myself, but I also don't want it to be myself. I wanted something different. In terms of, say, Black feminist roboticist, I hope those aren't just catchy terms, but I have spent time thinking a lot about, what does it mean to try to build inclusive robots? What are things that matter? What are areas I don't want to work in? And to me, that is something I think about. That's something in my, like, when I'm working, when I'm thinking, like, if I am working with someone and it seems like they're frustrated, and I'm like, oh gosh, I try to see what their side is. I try to see what I'm doing wrong. Like, it is something that uh, I don't want to just be a roboticist, I think is the short answer. I want to be, Ari, who is many other things.
A multifaceted person.
Yes.
Yeah. I think we just had a question earlier from Preeti about what does startup life look like?
I don't know how to answer that question, because sometimes that sounds like it's like relative to other things. And so if you don't have other things to be like, well, at a startup, you do this. If one thing I will say is that the startup has changed a lot. When I started, we were at an incubator, and then the pandemic happened. And so then we moved to remote, and now we're back. For a while there, we had 2 locations, and now we have 1 location. So it feels like at a startup, the consistency is it's inconsistent in many ways. And I also, one of the things I've gotten to do there is work in different projects, different areas. As we bring in people with more background, they you can kind of fluctuate. And I like how I do feel like my job and approach has always been like, sometimes I work at this, sometimes I work on something else.
Great. I think there's a question from Mamita.
So, for people who want to join, who want to go into a PhD after working industry, those students tend to be the most focused. They have an idea of what they actually want to do. And, I think it's awesome because, for me, I think I didn't know what I wanted to do. So then I went to grad school to try to specialize in something I didn't know what I was doing. And so for me, it was just like I felt really undirected. So for people who are interested in, getting that deep focus, learning specifically, like getting that guidance, I think that's a great, like that's awesome. If you want to go do that, I feel like a lot of people don't want to go do that because there is a difference being a student. For example, you could live in a dorm with a twin extra long bed. You may be at a level where that doesn't work for you.
That's funny.
I guess in tips, I think it's the traditional, how do you get into grad school? One of the challenges I would see in industry trying to create an application for grad schools, maybe not having as much research experience. If, say, your research experience was when you're in college, if you're not doing industry research. So I think there's still that, like, how do you have a comprehensive competitive application?
Yeah. So it seems like there are a lot of people who were fairly like pivotal in your journey. Could you talk about maybe like one or two of them, and maybe like what advice you received from them that you thought was particularly valuable?
I think, for me, I'm really thankful to my mom. Uh, she's been a consistent person there. She helped me get that work ethic. She's been a sounding board. Things go this way or that way. Still today, we'll chat on the phone a lot. So, um, for her, I think it's just she's been a cheerleader for a really long time. It's been really great.
And then, is there any particular advice that you've gotten from her or from any other mentor that you'd like to share with the rest of the group?
I would like to share kind of a weird advice, but it's take advice with a grain of salt. I think sometimes we over index on advice we hear, and sometimes advice is relevant now, and sometimes advice is relevant later. So, really listen to the advice you're hearing and also know that it's coming from someone who has their own different experiences, so it may not be
Mm,
relevant to you. I think one of the challenges you have is like, you get to choose what you're doing, what your journey is, and people can help you, give you perspective, give you guidance, maybe encourage you to get that energy. But ultimately, it's you, and so what they may think you should be doing could be irrelevant or could be very relevant. So I think always just take advice and think about it, but don't but stay true to yourself.
Makes sense. And so I think you kind of touched a little bit on this earlier during our conversation, but we often hear about the highlights of people's journeys, and not always about the lowlights. For whether it's the ones that you talked about earlier, where you kind of tried out therapy lamps and things like that, or maybe like other instances. How did you power through those moments? Like how what was going on in your mind, and how did you get past that?
So I don't think I powered through the moments. I think there's been many long stretches of time where it's been not great. I think that going back to what advice I've heard good advice lately, one of it was do what you're good at. Do more of what you're good at. And I think that's a great point. Like there's some things you enjoy, do more of them. If there's something you're good at, like I think there's this idea you want to be broad and general and good at other things. And that's a great idea, except maybe doing that to yourself is not fun. It makes you unhappy. So, I think ultimately you want to try to do see what's going on, respect yourself, respect your feelings. I've been in lots of therapy to try to, actually figure out how to do that, or even more importantly, listen to yourself. Like you'll go through something and you're exhausted at the end of the day and you just like, I'm exhausted. But then, do you really piece out why you're exhausted? What interaction made you exhausted? What project made you exhausted? Like, what are you doing that is making you feel that way? And then the other step is when you're doing things that are, helping your self care. Maybe it's watching lots of TikTok videos because those are pretty funny. You're acknowledge you're doing that because you wanted some, free time in your brain. You wanted that. And so sometimes, especially if you're trying to like, I want to be excellent, I want to be doing all these things, and you get that pitfall where you're not feeling good, and then you go and do stuff that makes you feel a little bit better, like I don't know, watching funny videos or hanging out. You feel bad about those times, and it's like that's the opposite. We want to make sure that we feel good about taking care of ourselves, taking that time to be our whole person. Maybe spending time with our family, describing ourselves differently. Being less career first, because at the end of the day, you're not gonna you matter more than what you do. Preeti asked about focusing on inclusivity in your work, um, how I've dealt with challenges with becoming vocally feminist, asking for equity.
Mm,
It's not
it's hard.
easy.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where uh, it's very easy to feel like you're on this defensive side. And I think there's also times where, people are like, you want to hire someone who's easy to work with and gets along with everyone. And so, what if you doing that makes you really unhappy because you have whatever things going on that is not, So, I don't have a great answer for that. I think it's a work in progress, but I do feel like we're trying to change the trends where it's no longer, how do I manage this? How do you manage? Can you manage that? Like, should we even try to have people manage this anymore? No, it's just, you want to be, who you are at work every day. And so, and I think it is important to try to attach yourself with people you think will value that. For
Mm,
me, especially, when I joined my company, it was like, oh, I think I'll learn from them. But I think there's a statement in that where I think they respect me. I think they want to teach me. I think they care about where I'm going. So when you see someone, you're like, I think they could teach me. You're actually saying a lot about that relationship already. And how do you fix things when they're bad? I don't know how.
yeah. I mean, it sounds like, some degree of like, introspection, authenticity, and then sort of just really great communication between you and the people that you're working with is sort of really, really important, to kind of, continue to progress. So maybe kind of looking forward a little bit, Ari, in 5 years' time, what do you want to do next?
Uh, Gosh, I've been really struggling because I've been asking myself that a lot. As I said, that you feel exhausted. What did that? What made you happy during the day? What
Mm-hmm.
made you? not happy. I've been spending a lot of time thinking about that. And I think there's I think there's still a part of me that's like, I really like where I'm going. I like this. I still feel very ambitious about my career. I still want to go and like learn new things. Um, do I want to lead technical projects? I think could be a place for me. And I've been spending time learning in my free time. So that clearly says something about like, oh, I'm interested in these things. So I have been um, looking at uh, the idea of leading more technical projects because I don't think I can do robotics by myself as good as I am. And as you get people around you to make each other better and work together, be more than the sum of your parts type of statement. So I've been listening to kind of more leadership things, and I've also been learning about some other AI stuff in my free time. And then also, I've been I've been pretty good at the planning plants. I have definitely got into the succulent game when it got too hot to go outside to garden.
That's awesome. So it sounds like you're considering maybe kind of leaving like engineering specific path and sort of switching over more to project management. Is that correct?
I think more the architecture. What are the components?
Okay.
How
So
do they
technical
come out?
architecture. Got it. Got it. Got it.
We'll
And
see. We'll have to watch this in 6 years. Like, did Ari go and become some architect out there, or she?
That's great. Well, on that note, unless there are other questions, I think this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much, Ari, for taking the time to speak to us in the committee. Thank you, everyone, for showing up. And we hope to see you at our next speaker series event in August with Dr. Maria Teleria from Canvas Robotics. So please stay tuned.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye, guys.